Hola, bon dia. Carl Munson here with the Good Morning Portugal live stream, YouTube and podcast. And I wonder how you're doing today. We will, of course, look at the COVID facts and figures. We'll look at the weather and we'll do a little bit of language with you as well. So I'm hoping to get through that fairly rapidly so that we can then devote the rest of the stream to talking to Dr. Mick Stephenson, who this morning is going to be looking at the collective trauma, the result, I suppose, of us psychologically of what's going on at the moment and how we can manage that on a individual basis as well. So do stay tuned for Dr. Mick, who is part of the community here and also extending a helping hand in terms of how we can cope with the emotional, mental health, psychological aspects of what's going on at the moment. So, good morning to you. Hello, bon dia. And I should say that I may not have that right. It may not be formal enough. I had some lovely feedback after yesterday's Portuguese lesson. But let's first of all take a look at Jorge Branco's coverage of the COVID-19 situation with his wonderful newsletter for Estrangeiros. And somebody's saying hello to me, but I think before we go there, good morning to you, Druba. Druba is doing an amazing project in Sintra. I'm hoping he'll let me share some of the photographs of his incredible project. You are such a hard-working homesteader, my friend. It'd be lovely to share some of your work, and I hope you'll join me here on the Good Morning Portugal live stream at some point. So, okay, let's go back to good morning to you, Druba, by the way, and thank you for tuning in. Let's go back to government prepares wide-scale intervention in TAP and summer bookings rise in the Algarve and Alentejo. So let's see how we are lifting lockdown, if at all, and how the rest of the year is shaping up. George begins. It's another good day for the stats with another very small increase in confirmed cases in terms of both raw numbers and percentage. It's the second smallest we've seen this month. It's also the third day in a row with a rise of less than 300. So hopefully that's cases, of course. So hopefully a trend is starting to emerge there. Another 25 COVID-19 patients have passed away, which is on the lower end of what we've been seeing, but still in that 20 to 35 range we seem to be stuck in. So there we go. 183 new confirmed cases for Portugal. This is as of yesterday, April 29th. 24,505, as you can see there. That's a percentage increase of 0.75. Death toll now in Portugal, 973 with 25 new deaths, unfortunately, sadly. That's a 2.64 percentage increase. And the new figure in George's infographic is the amount of people who've recovered, and that would be 1,470. Onward then to the airline of the country, the national carrier. Portugal's national airline can't survive without public intervention, says Infrastructure Minister Pedro Nuno Santos. He spoke at the parliamentary hearing of the Commission of Economy and Public Works this morning. As reported by Publico, Nuno Santos said the government was studying various interventions to ensure TAP not only survive, but could also continue to serve the country. This would imply a wide-scale intervention, he said. So looks like the Portuguese government are stepping in to help TAP in a way that perhaps the British government aren't with British Airways. Interesting times. There's an association working out new gym guidelines. So if you want to feel guilty about not going to the gym again quite soon, it looks like that will be possible. Summer bookings on the rise in the Algarve and Alentejo. I think this is quite important to cover. We've spoken before about how important tourism is to Portugal. This is what George is saying. The huge effect the pandemic is likely to have on the industry and how that may damage the economy as a whole. Well, a dim light has emerged at the end of a very long tunnel. Nicely put, George. The Alentejo and Algarve tourism boards have both reported an increase in bookings for summer, mostly from Portuguese people, but also some international tourists. Diario de Noticias reports. Tourism Alentejo and Ribatejo President Antonio Ceia da Silva called it a significant increase, but Algarve Tourism Region President João Fernandes was more cautious, saying it was a light increase. Fernandes described the bookings as a signal of hope, but said it wouldn't be anything like a normal year. I think we're guessing that, and there's a beautiful photograph of I would say the Algarve. Well, not entirely sure, but it's one of George's own photographs. Beautiful. And then you see he covers a number of things in brief. It's well worth subscribing to this newsletter, jorgebranco.substack.com, about how this is a handy tip. Publico alerted me to this handy New York Times explainer on how to stop your mask fogging up your glasses. I get that when I put my safety goggles on and a mask when I'm working on the house here. And yeah, you get that misting in the glasses. So there's a hack for how to avoid that. Abrupt reductions in business and consumer confidence in April, falling to levels not seen since 2013, 2014. Some parents won't let their kids return to school if they reopen. That's interesting. Trips to the emergency room for domestic accidents have halved, and criminality has been cut in half too. Amazing. What an upside that is. And Spain plans to return to new normal by end of June, which you can read through the link there. And on a lighter note, look, for those of us who are learning Portuguese, Netflix are going to be doing more in Portuguese and in European Portuguese, I think, rather than Brazilian Portuguese, which some even Brazilian and Portuguese speakers respectively do not understand each other. So it's well worth learning the European version. So let's go to the stream. Let's see how everyone's doing this morning. Good morning from Mrs. M downstairs. And I'm hoping Mrs. M will go into the garden with her camera on Monday and give you a little, what am I going to call it? A little treat, I guess. Her in a dressing gown, for one thing. That's a treat for me. But a treat for you will be to see our garden. As well as Mrs. M in her dressing gown, and have a look with her camera via the live stream of what's going on in our garden. And I invite you as well to join us with your camera. Come on and show us what you're doing in your happy homestead. I would love that at some point. Bon dia, Carl, and everyone. Always grateful to learn new things and hear from wonderful guests. Yes, I think it's going to be interesting talking to Mick. He's a pretty down-to-earth fella, as far as I can see in my brief chats with him, with some good insight on how to manage the collective and individual trauma. No other way of putting it, really. Yes, Waltz appears to be tuning in. Hey, good morning to you, Walt. Hola, bon dia from Portugal to you. I won't be this tatty old thing. I think that she's referring to a dressing gown. I think it might be we're having maybe a delivery of some sexier apparel for the garden broadcast. Be sure to tune into that on Monday morning. Okay, so let's have a look at our weather, shall we? I tried to share with you an interesting way of looking at the weather, but I couldn't keep up with it yesterday with the animation and the fast forecast that was happening before my eyes. I'm certainly no weatherman, but look at this. What I want to do is give you a sense of the weather to come. Obviously, you know what the weather's like right now by looking out your window, but we want to know, don't we, when spring and summer are coming. So look, Lisbon, the temperatures are rising. As the week from here on in progresses. Fairly good weekend. Look, 29 degrees in Lisbon on Sunday, albeit a little bit cloudy. Up in Porto, as you might expect, a little cooler, but look, a rainy couple of days, but a better Sunday for sure. It is a wash day. Mrs. M was saying she might be washing this weekend. I do my fair share on that as well. Fair, maybe not. I do something of a share on the washing as well. So we're looking forward to all that washing we can catch up with this weekend by the look of it. 27 degrees in Aveiro. Still cloudy though. A lot of cloudy weather across Portugal, but the temperature is rising, folks. Isn't that great to see? For those of you over in Castelo Branco area, yeah, a nice warm Sunday, and then it drops off again as we go into next week. Just flicking through. Obviously, Stephanie, that you want to know what's happening down Faro way. Look at that. Not as high. The temperature will not be as high as it is in other parts of the country, but 24 degrees is still very comfortable. And you look like you have a nice, steady and warm week to come. And in La Area, for those of you around Tomar, Alvázora, so on, a nice, warm weekend. Inland there does get very hot. It can be up in the 40s in around Tomar, landlocked as it is. 29 on Sunday, though, and cloudy. But look at that. Across the country, very cloudy, but very warm. 30 degrees in Santarém. Sorry, Santarém is your district for tomorrow, isn't it? But look, the highest of the temperatures anyway. So pretty awesome. And the autonomous districts, is that going to come up on my screen or not? Yeah, the Azores. See, low temperatures there. And pretty cool, remaining cool. But Madeira, that's where the sun is. Can't go there at the moment, but look at that. Sunny, but not as warm as mainland continental Portugal. So there you go. That's a quick look at the weather. And we will do a very quick bit of vocab with you. And because we want to get Rod on. But just to say, yeah, look, I'll share my screen with you for the project, the way of learning Portuguese that I favor, Practice Portuguese. And I want to share something with you on how they roll, because I'm very impressed. Me and the boy, instead of a bedtime story, again, learned some Portuguese last night. And a young fella, 8 years of age, learning about definite and indefinite articles. Look at this. in practice, there's a new feature on Practice Portuguese here, shorties, which are little lessons. So if you get tired and you want a bit of a, mix it up a bit from the conventional way of learning online, although these guys aren't very conventional, they keep it very exciting. There's so much content on here. Look, there is determined to make the most of another day in quarantine. A woman and her boyfriend prepare a delicious meal and go out for lunch on the balcony. So little set pieces as well to listen and learn. Also, they have a podcast and they have videos. Awesome. Now, the response to my Practice Portuguese efforts yesterday were for somebody to respond to the video with a little bit of feedback. Because I say "Olá, bom dia, tudo bem" to you guys because I see you as my friends. And then we had the news come in via now. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Look, here is our YouTube channel. We don't need to hear the show for a second time, but I wanted to show you the comments from yesterday's show, whereby I think an academic linguist got in touch, Gordianus, who said in a proper Portuguese salutation, in proper Portuguese, a salutation should be "Olá, como está?" Hello, how are you? Or plural for your videos, "Olá, como estão?" So that's what I should be saying to you in the mornings is "Olá, como estão?" That's how you might greet your family. If you make a grand entrance into the breakfast room, you might address your family formally as "Olá, como estão?" If you want to be very formal, then you could say "Olá, senhor, paixo bem?" Or "Hello, mister, have you been well?" Paixo bem, have you been well? There's some past tense. Practice Portuguese got all those verbs down as well. Very impressive set of verbs and conjugations on Practice Portuguese. Olá, tudo bem? Hello, all's well, all good can be used between friends or very informal speech. So that's where he's kind of gently pulling me up a little bit there, because as a broadcaster, perhaps I should be more formal. When you use "Hola, ¿cómo está?", you can see the similarities to other Latin languages like Spanish, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?" Look at how multilingual we are this morning. Or Italian, "Ciao, ¿cómo stai?" Or even French, "Comment allez-vous?" Sometimes you can hear "Oi, tudo bem?" Well, this is mainly used by Brazilians, but by using this, we lose a connection to the other Romance languages, and it would be the same as if I go to England and instead of saying hello, I used howdy. We don't want that. We don't recommend that. I can't endorse that. Either one of the examples above you choose. Any Portuguese will understand you perfectly. Learning Portuguese will help you greatly in mastering the other Latin-based languages, since Portuguese is the most complex grammatically and phonetically of them all. I kind of wish you hadn't told me that. Thank you for your video and keep them coming. I certainly will. Thank you so much, Gordianus. If you haven't subscribed to our channel here, please do. And let's call now Dr. Mick, shall we? After we said hello to a few people. You said you lost me there, Mrs. M. I think we're back now. Good morning from Julie. Hi, Julie. Good morning to you. Where are you? How are you doing this morning? Olá, bom dia. Tudo bem? Or como está? Or como estão to all of you. Bom dia, Carl, from a gloomy Lole, Claire and Steve. How are you guys doing there? I hope you're well. And Louisa doing a good job saying hello to everybody in the room there. So let's give Dr. Mick a ring now, shall we? And see how he's doing. Now, I should be able to... here we go. It's ringing, I think. Let me know, guys, if you can hear Dr. Mick all right. I need your help with this. It's like the old days, isn't it? Ringing through. Hello. We phoned a friend.
Hello.
Oh, no, wrong show. How are you, Dr. Mick?
I'm fine, Carl. Yourself?
Excellent. Yes, very well. We're looking forward to hearing from you. And this is a bit different for us because we don't have you in visuals, unfortunately, because you look a lot like, who did we say the other day? Robert De Niro, wasn't it?
George Clooney.
George
Carl.
Clooney, that was
George
it.
Clooney.
Okay. But
that's the general. That's the general confusion. Yeah, with George.
That's what people say. Okay, and you're.
Well, I'd like them to say George. Yeah, I'd like them to say Carl, really, rather than the actual.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And you are actually in UK. You're in the unfortunate position of you had a dream to move to Portugal, right? And you're halfway to doing that, and then the lockdown had you stay in UK when you want to be in tomorrow, Alvazara.
Well, just on the outskirts of Alvazara, yeah. So we've been kind of planning to move. Obviously, you can imagine over the course of a few months. The deadline was the end of. We set ourselves a deadline at the end of May, beginning of June, end of May. We even got transport kind of booked to finish off moving and stuff because we'd already moved some stuff across previously. And again, like you say, Carl, all the coronavirus business come in and it's put everything on hold. But you know, I say we're even at the point where my wife's retiring today. Obviously, in preparation, all this was conceived in advance to move over there in June, end of May, June. So I'm sitting in here. I'm sitting in the office, which is 9/10 empty, apart from a stall and a few bits and bobs. And yeah, we're just literally waiting to go. And I mean, who knows when it's all going to end? But
yeah,
I mean, we're kind of guesstimating at probably, I don't know, would you reckon September?
I really don't know. Yeah, but you may well be right with that. You know, unless you can bring about some other sort of extraordinary circumstances and convince the authorities here that you have a special reason to come. Who knows what might happen? And that's the problem. That's what we're talking about this morning, isn't it? Really. And I should say you are a doctor of psychotherapy rather than a medical doctor. So we don't want any questions about hemorrhoids or ingrowing toenails about that. This is about managing the collective trauma and our individual response, right? Because that's what you're all about in terms of your healing work.
Correct. I mean, yeah, my background originally was psychiatric nursing, and then I retrained to do trauma work, really to focus on working with psychological trauma. Best part of, well, it was, in fact, it was probably a bit fortuitous, really, that I ended up doing trauma work, because I actually enrolled on the course on September 11th, 2001.
Wow.
So it was probably always the case I'd end up doing trauma work. So that's my specialism, really, is working with people that have been through some sort of misfortune, which has left them traumatized.
Sure. And actually, I shouldn't have moved on there without wishing your missus a very happy retirement. What an auspicious day it is for you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, and sorry it's under such difficult circumstances. It's sort of traumatic in its own way.
Yeah, I think the thing is, we've had time, haven't we? I mean, individually and collectively, we've got time to adjust. I think that's the only thing. Is it's not like somebody has just told us at the beginning of the week, now this is the lockdown is here and now. I mean, one of the things as human beings is we're very good, Carl, at as long as we get plenty of, we eventually become inured to anything. Yeah, it's a trauma, but it's a slow burning trauma in that sense, rather than what I deal with on a daily basis, which is often acute trauma, where, for example, somebody's had maybe a really quite nasty road accident, or they've been violently assaulted, etc. So it's a slow burn trauma, whereas where I'm more my day-to-day work is acute trauma. Okay. If that makes sense.
Yes, of course, absolutely. And that's why you're here today, I suppose, to talk about how that slow burn effect, in a way, because it is, the news is being managed, not the news as in the news media, but the news from the governments. The guidance is a kind of a feed, a slow feed, isn't it? And they're kind of making it up as they go along in a positive way and also in a negative way, I suppose. And that has an effect on us. What do you think that is doing to us collectively? What kind of symptoms might people look out for that they might? Because this is the thing with trauma, isn't it? You don't always know how it's affecting you.
Well, I mean, let's start at the beginning. I mean, what I would say to you, Carl, is we've known for years that we've got the ability to, collectively. There is a thing called collective anxiety or even panic, and we've known about it for years. And it takes me back to the kind of the Orson Welles 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast. Yes. If you're familiar with it,
yes.
Where a single 1 hour program, I mean, some people have said since it's been exaggerated, but, jammed the networks afterwards with people thinking that some sort of, alien invasion or something was just about to descend upon us. But from a single broadcast, what it did prove to us, to a greater or lesser extent, is that, for example, the media has a huge effect on our anxiety levels. And I think the daily broadcast from the government is good. I think information can be very powerful in soothing our nerves a little bit if that's consistent and reliable information. I think one of the problems with the media can be quite scurrilous at times. So yeah. I think that's one of the problems. Yeah, not all media and not all the time, obviously, but it can be a little bit disheartening sometimes when really my job is to, or our job as therapists, really collectively, is trying to help people kind of rationalise situations and calm down, and then we got the press and media at times kind of acting with gay abandon. So, yeah, it's not helpful. It's not helpful. We do need that. We do need that news feed, though, but it's getting that news feed right.
Yeah, and I guess then it becomes a matter of individual response or responsibility, doesn't it, to manage the balance of the incoming information and what's going on in your inner state. What are you noticing among people? Because I guess you'll have a very unique view of this. You'll be seeing how people respond, you know, on Facebook and when you're talking to people. What are you noticing?
Less. Not so much the response. I think. I mean, this is obviously only my own, like you say, my own observations. Was that I think there was a lot more anxiety a few weeks ago, perhaps at the beginning. I think there was a lot of. I mean, we are living in kind of slightly, you know, otherworldly times, aren't we? I mean, it is a strange event that we're living through. But I think. You know, initially I saw probably more anxiety initially. Now people are calming down perhaps a little bit. I think it's important to remember that it's back to this thing about how we respond to fear, or just how we respond to change. I mean, the old. There's a kind of a 28-day kind of rule with our ability or our capacity to deal with change, and it kind of goes along with the principle. I mean, people move the figure around slightly, like in terms of numbers of days, but the general theory is, Carl, that after about 3 or 4 weeks of living with a situation or a change in behaviour, we actually adapt pretty well as human beings. It's an evolutionary thing, if you think about it.
Sure.
Is that after a while we do, as humans, tend to adapt to different circumstances, and we change. I mean, there are things that you can actually register in the human as they change from one state to another. So all I'm saying to you is that over the course of, say, 3 or 4 weeks, some of that panic should start to settle down as people start to behaviourally and also cognitively kind of change. So the argument I always say to people is, look, you know, if you always have coffee in the mornings if the last 10 years you've always had coffee in the mornings and somebody shoves tea in front of you, for the first couple of weeks, you'll probably want to go back to coffee. After 3 or 4 weeks, you'll be quite happy with the tea. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
so we do change naturally.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, I mean, as human beings, we are kind of evolutionarily wired to eventually change. Going back to your original question, though, some people seem to handle the anxiety better than others, and I think it's what you say, Carl. To a degree, it's something to do with personality, but it's also what's going on in people's worlds. I think if people are quite isolated and insular or feel quite vulnerable generally, then they're going to have a bigger response, perhaps, or a more negative response than people that are maybe more externally focused and have got, for example, somebody that may be working in hospital, people that may be out there doing stuff in the community may actually respond in a more adaptive way.
Okay. And so that's really amazing and so true. I mean, this is true of where we're living at the moment. Mrs. M, as soon as she saw the house we're living in, it's a restoration project, she said, I'm not living there. And then 28 days later, she's fine with it. So you're absolutely right. She's not fine with it, but she's better with it now than we have been. And we do adapt, just to making a joke of it, but we do adapt to the most hideous circumstances, don't we? Because we can, and because I suppose it's in our survival interest to do that. I suppose the thing is, for me, what I'm interested in is about how with traumatic events, although we can, I think the word you use, we get inured, which is a great word, and we get used to it, we adapt to it. But yeah, there is also the healing event, isn't there? That we may have adapted on one level, but it may be painful to us on another level. What do you say about that in terms of this whole COVID event, and what can people do if they are, if they get into, if there's something about them that's being triggered or something that isn't healed or is ongoing, if you like?
Well, that's probably the only. I think what I would say to you is, all I can say is Carl, what I would normally talk to a patient in such a way, in a way, and kind of relate it back to that to a degree. So whatever the trauma is, the first thing I'm going to say to somebody is understand what trauma is or what anxiety is in the first instance. Understand, it's something which is natural. Also, I think the other thing to remember is collective fear is natural as well, Carl, because I think that's important as well. The reason we panic or collectively panic is an evolutionary thing in the first place. So in other words, in the days of the bubonic plague, you didn't have to get bubonic plague to be frightened of it. So it's a bit of psychoeducation to begin with. And say, well, okay, look, this, you may be anxious, or collectively we may be anxious, but this is what we're designed. We have to understand that anxiety is naturally contagious. It's what we're designed to do. In actual fact, it was designed to keep us safe in the first instance. So I'm a big believer in psychoeducation, which is a posh way of saying education, really. So I try to say to people, look, okay, so let's kind of just take a step back, understand that we do collectively or individually, we do kind of panic, and this is why we panic. That panic often comes from parts of the brain called the amygdala, which is actually our fear center. So again, we are naturally wired to have that response, and it actually comes from, if you want, from our kind of deep within our subconscious to start to panic. So understand that. I think the other thing to understand as well is it's a strange thing about when we start to get anxious or we start to get panicky, Carl, is that our field of vision starts to close down. So what I'm saying to that is, the more anxious we get, the less options or choices we see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. Yeah, and I see that. Yeah, for sure.
And it's an evolutionary thing. So if life's fairly much bobbing along and I'm doing okay, I can think quite broadly in terms of threat analysis of what I'm doing with my life, kind of risk assessments generally. But if there's a lion standing in, about 6 feet in front of me,
yes.
My attention is going to be fairly much focused in one direction, and it's not going to be feeling very good. And my choices will feel very limited. So again, it's back to that psychoeducation, isn't it? Making people understand, well, actually, the more anxious you get, the more you feel trapped. So again, awareness, psychotherapy really responds to, or people often respond in psychotherapy just some simple messages, really. Understand how we get the fear, understand how our body and our brain responds to that fear by physically getting very, very tense, by mentally thinking we're running short of options, by catastrophizing as well.
Yes.
When we read and see things, we are inclined to look at the worst possible scenario, and it's understanding that, okay, right, that this is how we respond. What we can do about it. It sounds incredibly mundane or trite, perhaps, but just simply breathing, Carl.
Yeah.
Just physically sitting down, taking some time to just gently get control over our body. Because if you don't get control over your body, you don't get control over your brain. So just gently breathing, a little bit of extra oxygen does wonders for calming the body and brain. It helps release calming, chemicals, endorphins. It lowers our blood pressure, etc. Weirdly, people also say that just simply calming down and controlling our breathing helps with our immune system as well. So there's a double benefit. So physically, I will encourage people to understand the situation, fully understand the situation, understand why they're getting anxious. That's, I think, one of the big things. Second thing is physically start to get control of their body. I think the other thing is, I think that there's a common kind of misconception about therapy, that what we do is we spend all our days, trying to blast people with happy thoughts, positive thinking.
Yeah.
But actually, positive thinking, Carl, has a very short shelf life. You can't remain. I think there's the old maths equation that positive and negative cancel each other out. So as much as I don't encourage people, with the COVID-19 situation, I'm not going to sit there to ask them to. Well, I'll tell you, let's get really negative about the COVID-19 situation. Equally, I'm not going to ask them to be positive about it. What I'm going to ask them to do is think realistic.
Yeah.
Inject some realism into this, which is actually to say, yes, there are risks. We know there's risks, but if we take some sensible precautions, we should be okay, generally speaking. I think that's a lot of about what you do as therapists. I think a good therapist is really a rationalist.
Fantastic. So what I'm taking from that, and I hope everyone else is as well, is to kind of stop and breathe. That's really important. To forgive yourself for panicking. It's a natural thing. It's a natural thing to be anxious. But a little bit of self-awareness, a little bit of stopping and slowing down, breathing, and then the practicality you speak of there, the realism, and looking at what you can do, what you can't do, and making your best kind of practical plan to deal with that is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I think doing doing a sensible kind of risk analysis. So, sitting down, pen and paper is one of your best friends, I think, sometimes, and just, okay, so, this is the situation. What do I know? What can I take from what I've read? What can I take from what I heard? What's sensible? It's avoiding the 200 toilet rolls down at Asda's. Scenario. I can honestly have on heart say we didn't grab 200 toilet rolls from the local Tesco's or whatever when this all broke out. It's sitting down and thinking, well, okay, how long is this potentially going to go on for? What kind of how are we going? We know we're going to adapt because as human beings, we're going to adapt. And of course, that brings other problems as well, Carl, because if you think about it, that adaptation can actually be a bad adaptation because if the UK is trying to be, for example, here in the UK, if we're supposed to be in lockdown, what you'll find is that will be increasingly hard to police because people will naturally start to kind of drift back into the old ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That
is
what's happening. Yeah, for sure. Wow.
I don't know what the situation in Portugal is. Are people adhering or kind of?
I think this is a very compliant culture. People do like to stick it to the man as well on a sort of on another level. There's the upper level, I suppose, the formal level of how people are very polite and cultured, culturally conformist, and so on. And it's private. If you're how you kind of work underneath the radar, there is definitely a counterculture as well, a subculture. But it's right. But it is quite. I think that's known generally among by everybody. So you manage it on that basis. Interestingly, where I think in the UK it's a little bit more in your face, isn't it? But in terms of how people respond positively or negatively to what's going on to them.
As I say, it's interesting that how collectively we will kind of how we do change. So, for example, maybe kind of 2 or 3 weeks ago, there have been certain people who have been too frightened to leave their front door. But over time, as people start to venture out and things start to calm down, the likelihood is that people will start to kind of, I say curfews will be, well, we haven't got a curfew, but things like that will be more, I think, tested.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because people will just find this, they'll become inured to the shock and, and adapt accordingly.
That's so interesting.
Which is not necessarily a good thing.
You're right.
Sorry.
You're right. No, the adaptation and how it can be positive and negative is amazing because politicians rely on that as well, don't they? Austerity, for example, relied on the fact that people would get used to it and not fight it necessarily. So I can see that for sure. I have some greetings for you, Mick, while you're here. Dr Mick, hope you will join our community very soon. You're going to love Alvazara. And Gary also adds, working in the MOD for over 15 years, I've encountered people with PTSD. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this when you move over here. So that sounds like you've got a drinking buddy to have a chat with on arrival, which is pretty awesome.
Oh, this is lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those kind words. Thank you. And, we're looking forward. We're looking forward to coming over.
Yeah, well, we look forward to welcoming you here. I don't know if you want to finish with one final piece of advice, sort of practical advice to people to finish off with. While you're thinking of that, a word from Rod. Good morning again, mate. Well, a little bit of sunshine coming out of these troubled days. With the easing of restrictions here in Portugal, the government last week decided to allow the transportation of horses across the border. So on Saturday, we have a beautiful Lusitano stallion being picked up by an international horse transport company to start his journey to the UK. He will have at least 4 stopovers of 12 hours each to rest from the journey and should emerge in sunny Suffolk, fresh and we've run out of space there. But wow, if they can move a beautiful Lusitano stallion from Portugal to the UK, I'm sure we can get you over here, Dr. Mick. If I can make that comparison.
Maybe, hopefully not in a horse box. The wife may have a word in my ear if we end up in that trouble on that. But final thoughts, probably final thoughts was, and again, these are all very simple and mundane things, but your best therapist, are your drinking buddies, although the pubs are shut at the moment. Your best therapist are your drinking buddies, obviously your partner, your wife, your husband. These people, Carla, are, most therapy in this world is informal therapy. It's friends and relatives and good friends and good partners are your therapists. So keep those communication channels going. Keep talking. We last night, me and my wife have got 5 daughters between us. So last night we got the old kind of WhatsApp connection going, and we did a community, we did a quiz, like a pub quiz thing online. Fantastic. And just keep those connections open, just keep talking, talk about your fears. Men are traditionally not too hot on this subject, are they, Carl?
True.
But it's seen as not very macho to talk about any concerns you've got. But please do talk. Particularly guys who tend to bottle things up. Years ago, I used to work. I used to do some work assessments for the police force and dealing with officers who'd been traumatised. And it takes sometimes a bit of wheedling out, to get people to talk. But so final thought, concluding thought, please talk to one another.
That's superb, Mick. Dr. Mick Stephenson there. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, and we look forward to having a beer with you when you get to Portugal. Thank you so much for joining us. Final word from Rod here. He will go into training as soon as he's settled, and very soon could be mixing or even ridden by the likes of Russell Crowe or many other famous actors. So life does go on. I think he's referring to the Lusitano stallion and not our guest today, Dr. Mick Stephenson. Dread that thought of being ridden by Russell Crowe. But whatever floats your boat, Mick, thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries. You've left me suitably traumatised. Thank you.
But you know what to do about it. That's the great thing. Bye for now. Take care, mate.
I'll say goodbye.
All right.
Cheers, bye.
Bye for now. There you go, Dr. Mick Stephenson. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us and sticking around, because we had quite a lengthy chat, longer than planned, but thank you for sticking around. And we'll be back again tomorrow. It's Fungi Friday tomorrow, everybody, with the gang from Shimajito. We'll be talking about urban farming. We'll be talking about localized agri-tech and mushrooms, of course. So look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much. Take care and bye for now. Te logo. Ate amanya.